ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ। ਸਲੋਕ ਮਹਲਾ ਪਹਿਲਾ। ਦਇਆ ਕਪਾ ਸੰਤੋਖ ਸੂਤ ਜਤ ਗੰਢੀ ਸਤ ਵਟ। In this Shabad, Guru Nanak Dev Ji is still in his youth and is in a Brahmin family. Now, in a Brahmin family, he is going through this ritual in which he gets this thread, which has religious symbolic meaning. And Guru Nanak Dev Ji is questioning this institution of having this thread and asks the Pandit who is about to give him this thread during the ritual to give him one whose cotton is made of compassion. So that is the first part of this first pankti in the Shabad, to make the cotton of that thread from compassion, and to make contentment the actual thread or the weave, and modesty the knot, and truth the twist. So these are all parts of the thread, or of the little piece of the string that goes around Brahmin families. And Guru Nanak Dev Ji is questioning that and is asking to make a kind of thread that contains these components, which is impossible, but it builds to Guru Nanak Dev Ji's points in the next pankti. Ehu Janeyu Ji ka Heita Pande Gat. In this pankti, Guru Nanak Dev Ji is asking the Pandit to give him such a thread, such a sacred thread, because this thread, which Guru Ji will describe later on, is extremely sacred and has certain qualities of it, and proves something of the person who's wearing it. And Guru Nanak Dev Ji asks to get this kind of thread, so then he can inhibit those qualities of which the thread is made of, like of compassion, of contentment, of modesty, and of truth. And these are the qualities that really matter to Guru Nanak Dev Ji, and these are the qualities that we should inhibit. But Guru Ji will keep on explaining about this thread in the next panktis. Na eho tutte, na mal lage, na eho jalle na jaye. Guru Ji now explains the qualities of this thread, how the thread cannot be broken, or how it cannot be soiled by filth, so it cannot be dirty, and how it cannot be burnt nor lost, so it stays with the person who holds it, or the person who wears it forever, because these qualities that are from the thread will always stay with that person. And Guruji will explain this later and relate this to why he asks of such a thread. Danaso manas nanaka jogal challe pai. Guru Nanak Dev Ji tells how someone who has such a thread is blessed already. And this is because they embody the compassion, the contentment, the modesty, and the truth that comes from that thread. And that thread cannot be taken away from them. So they are always embodying those four ideals that Guruji heavily stresses on. So Guruji asks for this thread from the Pandit. And Guruji knows that it's not possible to buy such a thread. And this will be explained in the next pankti, how you cannot buy such a thread. And therefore, it must be earned from Waheguru. But in this example, or in this story, that where Guru Nanak Dev Ji is sitting in front of the Pandit, he asks why he should have a thread that does not have these qualities. And he wants these qualities and wants to be like those and looks up to those that have such a thread. because everything else would be falsehood. So again, Guru Nanak Dev Ji asks for this thread, and thinks that those who have this thread are blessed, and wants us to realize that, so we can work towards that. Chokad mul arnaya behe chokke paya. Guruji now tells us how the thread that the Pandit is giving him, it can be bought for only a few shells, and back in the time period of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, a few shells can be compared to a few pennies. It's very cheap. And how it could be sit in a nice little enclosure and be presented and be put on, even though it's all false. And how a thread that Guru Nanak Dev Ji has explained cannot be bought, which is explained later and is contrasted by the thread that is presented in front of him by the Pandit. Sikha kan chadaya Gur Brahman thaya. Guruji in this pankti describes his own situation, how he's sitting right there with the Pandit, and the Pandit is whispering instructions in their ear and giving him this false thread that's worth only a few shells from an enclosure, and is turning him from a Brahmin into a Guru. Guru Nanak Dev Ji is essentially pointing out the absurdity of the situation, how having these instructions and having this worthless thread to Guruji, it's worthless. It does nothing. But what would be better, what would really turn him into a Guru, would be a thread that is filled with compassion, contentment, modesty, and truth. All these attributes, if implanted into Guruji or into anyone, will turn them into a Guru. But there is no such thread, and this thread that cannot break or be soiled or cannot be burned or cannot be lost doesn't exist. It is mentality that exists. The mentality that contains compassion, contentment, modesty, truth, which cannot be taken away from someone. So Guruji is asking for that kind of mentality, that kind of teaching. And that doesn't come from whispers that come from a Pandit that are very vague and are just given within like a few minutes. This takes lots of experience and contains a blessing from Waheguru. So this is what Guru Nanak Dev Ji is going after. And Guruji in the next pankti will explain what happens to the thread and to that person long after they've passed, and how they really are meaningless in the long run. Oho mua, oho chadpaya, vetaga gaya. In this last pankti, Guru Nanak Dev Ji explains that once a person dies who wears this false thread, the thread itself will just fall away, and the person's soul, if gone away, will just depart without the thread. So in the long run, the thread has no meaning. It has no value in the long run. But something like a mentality that's filled with compassion, with contentment, with modesty, and with truth, that will stay with the soul and will not depart without it, because it's part of the soul. It's a purified version of the soul. So this thread that Guru Nanak Dev Ji is describing doesn't exist because it's not a thread. It's a part of yourself. It's your mentality. It's the way you look at things. It's when you're compassionate, when you're content, when you have modesty, and when you're truthful can you really become a Guru. And when you can really be blessed by Waheguru, or know that you're blessed by Waheguru. And Guru Nanak Dev Ji proved that. We don't know who the Pandit is, not really in the long run compared to Guru Nanak Dev Ji. The Pandit was wearing his thread of falsehood all over, but Guru Nanak Dev Ji really had the qualities of the thread inside of his psyche and the way he went out and committed himself to the greater good and educated and learned and really became a guru. We know about Guru Nanak Dev Ji and Guru Nanak Dev Ji's story because of Guru Nanak Dev Ji's actions that came from the way he saw things in their truthful way. So we need to learn from this, from what Guru Nanak Dev Ji is telling us. We should try to change at least our mentality, the way we look at things, be more compassionate, try to be more content, have more modesty, and be more truthful, because in that way eventually we will become blessed by Waheguru Ji. Or if we change our mentality completely into that mode of compassion and contentment and modesty and truth, then we are displaying our blessings from Waheguru Ji, and we will essentially be better versions of ourselves and actually have an impact in the long run, unlike those threads who will just be thrown away, which are just a few shells and don't mean much in the long run. So to make an impact in the long run, you have to have these attributes, and we must chase after this thread that Guru Nanak Dev Ji is talking about, because in that way we can really be blessed by Waheguru Ji, and that is what we should be aiming towards. Waheguru Ji ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji ki Fateh.